Hello and welcome to the Strong Suit Podcast, where we focus on the people part of your business. Every single episode, I feature a world-class expert on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rock stars. And I am so pumped to speak with my guest today, Nolan Mondrow. Now, before I tell you about Nolan's business, I will tell you that this product would make my life so much easier. And so I'm guessing you'll probably feel the same by the time that we're done. It is a good thing that this business exists, and Nolan is CEO of a fascinating company called LockState, based in Denver. Let me just give you a little about the business and the product, and then we're going to get right into it. LockState has created, if you can imagine this, the first remote locking platform. So this isn't for a house or a condo or an office, right? So you no longer need to be in front of your house or office or vacation home to lock and unlock it, right? You can do it all remotely via the cloud. And that is a huge innovation, especially if you own and rent out Airbnbs or VRBOs, those types of things, vacation rental managers, apartment owners. I can envision this for commercial as well. So Nolan and his team of about 25 people have developed not only the lock and the hardware, but the platform behind it. There's a lot that goes into it. And over the next 20 minutes, we're going to talk about how he's done it and the people behind it. Nolan, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Awesome to have you. So just give us kind of 60 seconds overview, just to kind of build on that as to the backstory. Kind of how did you get so fascinated with locks? I'm sure there's always something, right?
Yeah, I know.
Did you get locked out of your house as a kid?
You don't usually hear those two terms in the same sentence, right? Fascinating locks. But I will tell you, we started years ago when we started this business under the same corporate shell, but under a different business model, selling locks and safes. And one of the target markets that crept up was vacation rental, and they were clamoring for a Wi-Fi version of the lock for multiple problems they had. So the real this company in its current state, we really think of as having been born in 2011 when we started to address that need.
Got it. And what has made you so successful and unique, am I right, is the Wi-Fi cloud-based piece of this, right? There's a lot of locks you can go to Home Depot and get a remote, get a keyless lock, a digital lock. Those are plentiful. This is a very different approach, right?
That is correct. So we are unique in that we're really the only cloud software that is controlling multiple connected locks. So not just a Wi-Fi lock, but Z-Wave locks, other technologies. That is our expertise. Got it.
So I go to an online platform and I can say this lock, unlock at this time, lock this time, change the lock, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct.
Fabulous. Love it.
So we were, and I'll tell you, the reason we got into this space is because we've always had this process, as many companies do, of following the customer need. And the vacation rental space had the biggest problem of how do they get their guests in. That's what we solved first.
Now, so before LockState, I assume they would hand off the key, somehow physically hand off a key, leave it under the mat, it gets stolen, they get broken into, stuff like that, right?
Absolutely. They would either hand off the key, or people would copy the key, lose the key. They'd have to spend their time meeting guests at the property. They had no idea when they went in, when they were gone. So a whole slew of things.
Really,
we partner with companies like Airbnb and Expedia. So now for that group, the experience is the guest books, Airbnb dips into our system, and we immediately send the door code to the guest. But that code will not work until the guest's vacation starts, and it expires when the vacation ends.
Okay, good. So now we understand a little about the product and the business. You said about 25 employees. Let's delve into the people part of this, and because I'm fascinated with, for starters, you have about 25 people. What's the mix of those people, roughly speaking? Are these hardware engineers, software developers, salespeople? What's the mix?
Well, we run the gamut of all the departments you just mentioned. So we've got lots of developers, we've got lots of support people, marketing and sales, and administrative. So there's a good mix. Obviously, as a company scales and grows, a lot of those divisions start to grow more. So that's what we're experiencing right now.
And I know. Speaking of growth, you just closed a round of almost $6 million in venture capital. Is that right?
That's right.
Congratulations. By a terrific firm out of Boulder, Iron Gate Capital. A lot of times when people raise around that sizable, it's going to be deployed into hiring people or expanding or upgrading the team. Is that part of the strategy here?
No, really, I just want to go buy a boat.
A well-secured locked boat.
What's really great about LockState's product is that it is mature. We've already scaled the platform and tested it. I mean, we have very large international customers like Target stores, the largest company out of Oklahoma called Love's,
Yep.
very large hotel and apartment chains and office buildings. So we don't need to spend the majority of that investment in the product development side. We really need to scale up the sales and marketing. So that's where the focus has been.
So you'll be hiring folks, obviously, with this round of capital.
Will be, have been, absolutely.
How did you learn how to hire people? I know that sounds like a strange question, Nolan, but it's not typically taught in schools, and there's not a lot of great books on it. A lot of people, it's just kind of trial and error, more error. So how did you learn to hire people?
Yeah, well, I think as most CEOs will agree, the process of hiring has been changing drastically over the last 5 years. And so we've had to evolve with that, not just in the supply and demand of talent, but also in what we need to do as a culture to attract people. We want to be known as the best place to work. And so that's been a really big focus, making sure that we have our finger on the pulse of what an employee wants out of their job, because that's been changing over the last 5 to 10 years.
Yep.
Particularly in this market.
And so it's not something you formally studied. It's been more trial and error over time.
No, in fact, if I go back to my business school days, I would kick myself in the head for making fun of my organizational development classes, because
you were so busy in finance and accounting, right?
Exactly. At the time, we thought that was just useless garbage, and now, as it turns out, that was the most important class that I should have been paying attention to.
How funny is that?
Yeah, that's one word for it.
What does your hiring process look like? You don't have to go through every single step, but just kind of give us the big chunks. If I was interested in one of these new sales roles, what would typically be the process I would go through?
Well, the first process is we have to find you. And so in the recruitment, we really, especially in this market, we have to attack that on multiple fronts. We obviously put postings on our site. We have an outsourced HR partner that places ads and does some outreach to targeted companies for these positions. That has become we are going to be launching internally a referral compensation program so that our employees are encouraged to go and tell other people about these positions. That's probably the biggest change over the last 5 years, I would say.
What was it? How did that compare to 5 years ago? What were you doing at the time?
Frankly, 5 years ago, or maybe a little bit longer, it's almost like you could do some postings on Craigslist. I mean, that's a little bit of an exaggeration for some roles, but and get flooded with resumes.
So as the economy has tightened and the unemployment rate has dropped, it's gotten progressively harder, of course.
Absolutely.
So so now you've got some candidates, and I raise my hand to say, "Wow, this sounds great. I want to sell locks to hotel chains." What happens next? What are the next key steps of the process?
So in our process, the next thing that happens is we will, if you've come from an internal source, we'll screen you internally. If you've come from our partner, HR for outsourced partner, they'll screen you, and then we'll get a collection of folks that we think are worth having a phone chat with. We'll do the phone chat with the hiring manager, and that person will be sort of the primary screen to decide whether or not it makes sense to do a face-to-face.
Got it.
So that's, typical funnel of hire. Once we get, then when we start to schedule the face-to-face, we do a lot, an extensive amount of internal interviewing. I mean, it's not uncommon for 5 people to sit down with any candidate. Doesn't matter what we're hiring for.
Five doesn't strike me as crazy. I mean, it's 20% of your company, but it doesn't strike me as a crazy number of people.
Yeah, I think what is, and maybe it's not different, but what is interesting about it is that the 5 people will come from many different disciplines, not just.
So you're a very cross-functional approach.
Correct. I mean, culture has become a very important thing to us, and I hate to say that because it's such a buzzword, but I view culture as, I can't make a culture in our organization. All I can do is set what our values are and hope that we're attracting people with that value set that will take part in that. So
have you gone so far as to actually codify the words? No, I don't mean the bullshit list of values in the lobby, but the words that describe the DNA of the people that you're looking to hire?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think they're encompassed, and thanks for cussing. Now I got free reign. So, to carve through the bullshit, we actually do have a set of values that, and I'll back up for a step. We were actually just talking about this morning in a morning meeting. We went through a process to uncover what we really thought our values were, because we had tried to attack it so many times. And the thing that the one exercise I thought was the best was we identified about 5 or 6 people in the company in a group that we thought were just, these are the people we say are LockState.
Yeah.
And then we started to describe what is it about those people we really like. Yeah. And we just sort of sectioned off the pieces that were common themes, and that's how we created our values. You wanted to come at it from
a bottoms up, as opposed to So instead of, I think this is a really key point, Nolan, for listeners, because as opposed to it being aspirational, where you say, oh, we should be fast moving, right? You look at your rock stars who are already kicking it, and you say, what do they have in common? It's much more of a bottoms up approach, isn't it?
That is hitting the nail on the head.
And so what's an example of just one thing that was on the wall this morning?
Well, I'll tell you more than one thing. I'll just let you know what our values are. Our values, the first one is we want people to be happy and engaged. I want you to come and enjoy what you're doing, and I want you to be fulfilled at the end of the day when you leave. So happy and engaged. We want you to be a solving kind of person. When you're coming up against an issue, spend an extra 5 minutes and see if you've got the answer. And even if you need help, go and get some help with the first, with the qualifier. Here's what I think, but what do you think? So happy, solving personality. We want people to have integrity. And we define that as do the right thing when nobody's watching.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
That is the hard part. But it becomes easier and easier with, as you practice it. And we want people to take pride in what they're doing. I call it kind of being in the zone, like an athlete. But when you sit down, heads down, even if you're just crafting an email, when you've done something good, and just feel good about that. Take pride in the work you're doing. And then finally, it's just customers pay our salaries. That's where our paychecks come from. No customer gets left behind. Take care of every single one.
And you have a lot of customers in the chain. You got are you selling through retail or no? Just direct?
We do. We have multiple channels. So we have
a lot of channels. You got direct customers, indirect customers, wholesalers. There's a lot of people to please.
Yes, that's correct.
Got it.
We do have a lot of channels.
So when you think about that, that's very helpful. That's a great overview of kind of the DNA of LockState. When you think about the recruiting process, what would you say is the most unique part? Is there any ritual or rite of passage or something that you think sets your recruiting process apart?
Well, I can't give you our rituals.
There's no hazing. But
no, there is no hazing, of course. I would just say that we have a very eclectic mix of folks that include people from other countries that are really part of our culture and our organization. We've got folks that are full-time contractors in Brazil, Croatia, other areas. And so we bring a lot of that into the recruitment process from an opinion perspective. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, it's really interesting when you take the diversity, not just the buzzword of the diversity, but real diversity up and down the line, any way you define it, and put that into take that into account when you are hiring an employee. I've always believed that you hire slow. Yeah. And that's kind of making it tough right now because we have so many needs for roles.
Well, the only way to do that is to stop just-in-time hiring and start building a pipeline ahead of the need.
That's so true. And
if you rely on just-in-time, you're host because you're under pressure to settle.
That's right. And so we have active local networking going on. I try to attend a lot of events just to make sure that we keep our presence out there. And I do have several of these conversations going on, seeding potential future, even if we're not ready for that role. Yeah.
If you had to guess, Nolan, as CEO, what percentage of your time over the course of a month would you say you spend on the people stuff? So recruiting, leadership, coaching. So not product, not selling, not raising money, but the people part.
Well, when you're in a fundraise, it obviously wanes a little bit.
But now that you're done with the fundraising,
it's at least 50% of my time.
Got it. So half your time is on people stuff.
Absolutely. And that's across the board.
You mentioned you're about to put an employee referral program in place. Can you give us a hint on kind of what it's going to look like? I don't want to ruin the surprise if you're rolling it out to the team, but what are the basic components?
It's very simple. Basically, the best place to get really good people is to ask your really good people to refer people to you.
Got it.
So
So you're rolling out an incentive.
there will be an incentive. It'll be
Got it.
somewhere, a few $100 to $500,
Got
something
it.
like that.
Got it.
So nothing crazy, but just enough to make it interesting. Really, the bigger incentive for folks, and I think that if you had interviewed our team here, you'd find they would say they would probably do it even without the incentive.
Yeah.
Why? Because
Right.
they want to work with good people too.
Sure.
So,
well, Google did a large study for listeners who don't know this and found that the amount you pay is almost negligible. They doubled from $2,000 to $4,000 their referral bonus and found it didn't move the needle at all. So it's far more important to promote it every month, keep it in front of your people, et cetera. So I give you a lot of credit for that.
Yeah.
If you had to guess, of your 25 people, could you guess how many came from employee referrals?
That is a good question. I mean, it's definitely in the 20% or more range, but I'd have to dig into that a little bit more.
Got it. But it's meaningful.
Yeah, it's not insignificant.
So in the pre-interview, we talked about this, Nolan, and I told you I'd really only want to have you on the show if you could talk about a very difficult time in the business's life with regard to the people. And I give you a lot of credit for agreeing to do that. Walk us through kind of what transpired in the business, and most importantly, what the people impact was. And then we'll talk about kind of what you did about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think if I look, I don't have to look too far back. Last year, we did have a challenge where one of the products that we sell is a Wi-Fi door lock. And these things have a really great feature, which allows you to update new features and functions even when they're in the field anywhere in the world.
Like a basic firmware update, right? That you can have.
Exactly.
A lot of devices now have.
Yeah, exactly. If you're familiar with IoT, it is a firmware update. And in the process of doing that, and I'll preface this, we've obviously now put lots of checks and balances and fixed this possibility from happening again. But in the process of doing that, there was a very small subset of our customers to whom we sent the wrong firmware update to their locks. And when I say very small, I mean 2% or so of things out there that were affected by this. And even though it was a very small percent of our customer base, these people rely on access control to run their businesses. It's such an integral part. If you can think of somebody running a hotel or an Airbnb and boom, all of a sudden they've got an issue with their door, that is emergency.
It's everything.
It is everything.
It's like a mission critical type of thing. You wouldn't think it's a big deal, but it is. If you can't get in, it's pretty hard to use the facilities.
It's one of those things where, they never had it before and they got by fine, but once they started using it, they became so dependent on it that it is tragic.
So it sounds like you pushed out a firmware update and it clonked out a bunch of these locks, I'm assuming, or something like that.
That's right.
So
people were able, just to give you a sense for how important and how reliant they came on our software. Of course, every one of the locks that we sent has a physical key, so people still could get in. It was locked out per se, but the whole process of that Airbnb thing was not in play.
So I can only imagine that the tweet storm must have been ridiculous, right? Because
oh my God, the tweet. Well, I'll tell you what. If and we are an IoT company of sorts. We are a big partner of Airbnb, a SaaS firm. I mean, the press ate it up. I don't think we have enough money in our marketing budget to get all the publicity that we got out of this.
You know what? That's good press, right?
Well, if you had told me that,
I can tell you in hindsight,
said,
it is great press. It certainly didn't affect your ability to raise a great round of capital and build a great business. And every business faces these things.
Yeah, let's talk about that, actually. It turned out to be good press, but why? And this is maybe circling around to the people side of the business. And I'll quickly walk you through how we addressed it. I mean, we got everybody solved within a couple of weeks, completely back up and running. But the first thing we had to do is we sort of had a war room of all the management team, across everything, and said, how are we going to take care of these people? Because we had people that were international, not just in the States. And
everyone dropped what they were doing, I'm assuming. This was all consuming for some period of time.
Oh my God, for days, maybe even weeks, we had folks working, till midnight daily, just making sure that we were processing through all the issues that any single, comes back to the don't leave any customer behind. I mean, I don't care if you had one lock in Nova Scotia, we needed to get you solved. So that was the first step. And then the second piece that was really challenging is our entire support team was completely inundated. They had to work overtime. They had to take really angry calls,
Yeah.
and they had to believe that we were going to get through this fine and make it right. Otherwise, they would have just fallen apart. And
Yeah,
so the
you
team,
had to really convince your internal people, they were your first customer, that we're going to make this right.
that's right. That's absolutely right.
Got
And everybody understood that we were going to take care of this problem and make it right. And so they rallied. I mean, the team, so this comes back to the press piece. The thing I think that's the best press about it is how quickly and effectively we took care of these people when we had an issue. You know, we
Yep.
came out with it right away, immediately. We emailed and notified every single person that was affected.
Yep.
We had multiple communications, you know,
Yep.
sometimes every hour, letting them know the status and where they fell and how it was all going to get taken.
And I'm sure that wasn't even fast enough for some of them, right?
Well,
For some customers.
we live in an instant gratification.
Be careful what you wish for.
It is the truth, but you know, we really pulled out all the stops and did everything.
So tell me about what you learned from a people perspective during that nightmare of a time, those few weeks.
Well, I think that's really when you test if your real culture lives up to the values that you put on the board.
Yeah, you find out if it's just some bullshit on a wall or if it's real.
Right. Yeah, and it's, you know, until it gets tested, I guess you really never know for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm pleased to have. I'm not pleased that we had to test it, but I'm pleased that the team really was tested and came through great.
When you think about, I'm sure you did an exhaustive study to figure out what went wrong. Did anyone lose their job over it?
No, this was a really a perfect storm of things.
Yeah.
That the percent of chance of it happening was minute in the first place.
Good.
You know, which involved, you know, some of our partners, you know, including some big companies. And it was just one of these things that we now have to make sure never happens again. And we put things in place that there's so many levels of protection now.
Now it really is like a company of locks and security.
Yeah, you fight the last war in many senses, right? But that's what we've done.
So I appreciate you sharing that candidly, Nolan. Let's end on a positive note. Why don't you share a recruiting success that you've had over the past 12 months? Maybe it was a Rockstar hire that you've made or something, you know, that really even surprised you.
Well, I've got a couple. I'm not going to obviously say names, but I have a couple that really stand out for me. The first is when you're recruiting for your stakeholders, and that includes your board of directors.
Yeah.
And we have attracted really a rock star board member that is excited about what we're doing, and we did that by showing culture and showing how transparent we are about what we're trying to do, and being very open. I think one of the pieces that helps us to attract these rock stars is, you know how recruiting can be. You come in, everything looks great, and then you start your job, and boom, that's when all the warts come out and the things that no one ever told you. We really try hard never to be that kind of organization. So we've got we've got several people that we've attracted in that manner. So it's hard to single out one because I really am so proud of all of everybody. But I would say those are two that really come to mind.
Fantastic. I give you so much credit, not only for getting through what you got through last year, but on closing this round of capital. And it sounds like you're off to great stuff at LockState. How can people learn more about the product or get in touch with you?
Yes, please go to www.remotelock.com.
That's the name of the product, right? Remote Lock.
That is the name of the product, but also the website
that
we're using to promote the product, and tells you all about our system, software, all the verticals that we solve problems for. You know, vacation rental is one, but multifamily, small business, retail, industrial, all these things.
Fantastic. Congratulations again, and thanks for being on the show, Nolan.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.